Welcome to the Kingdom Doers podcast. Today we have keynote speaker Will Baggett and author. Thank you so much, Will, for being here. And we're going to let you shine in what you do. But we're excited to have you.
Absolutely. Melissa and Estes, thank you all so much for this wonderful platform. It's the first of its kind that I've ever been on and had the pleasure of sharing on. So I appreciate you all's creativity and just what you all did to answer the call to make this a reality. So I'm excited for today's conversation and thank you for having me.
Thank you for that.
Absolutely. And Will, we're excited to introduce you to our audience. Will is an interactive keynote speaker and workshop host. You have a new book out, Hues of Hope, that came out a few months ago, A Colorful Journey Outside the Lines. And Will, you're a body language specialist. You have an interactive delivery that you give to corporations and colleges to inspire people to color outside the lines of their perceived limitations to achieve their unprecedented success. Now, that was a mouthful, but tell us in your own words what that is and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So the inspiration behind Color Outside the Lines actually came from a 6-year-old that I actually met when I was a teacher a few years ago. And to make a long story short, I would be in the classroom and the teacher would be telling him, hey, stay inside the lines, stay inside the lines. And he'd just be doing his thing and just going across. And one day the teacher brought him to the front of the class and said, can you tell the class why you can't see the color inside the lines? And he held up his paper with all the scribble and all his glory. And he said, it's not that I can't stay inside the lines. It's just that this paper is not big enough for me to express myself. That's it. I was like, a 6-year-old taught me that. And absolutely. So I picked up that as kind of that only has been kind of a tagline and a rebrand of mine in the past year. Prior to that, I was more heavy on the career, professional development, and body language side. And now I've learned to integrate it. I thought at one point in time, you could only be like super, super professional and super, super structured. And then there's this side of me that is very much like outside the lines, kind of rebellious. I kind of ask for forgiveness before I ask for permission, right?
Yeah.
And I found a way to integrate the two. And so for me, it's all about making sure people can see the best version of themselves within themselves, right? Sometimes, as we say back home, there's an old gospel song that says, I'm too close to the mirror to see what you see, in reference to God, right? And so you can put your nose as close as you want to the mirror. And sometimes you just won't be able to see yourself the way God sees you or the people that you're impacting or influence see you. And so that's what my mission, my purpose is all about. And that's why how we inspire people to color outside the lines.
Wow. That's really cool. And what a reframe from a 6-year-old, like to have that insight to think of it differently like that. Paper's just not big enough for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really cool. I love how you said, we're maybe like sometimes too close to the mirror, and so sometimes they had to kind of like look back or take a step back. And what do you think some people are struggling with when that's showing up in their life, when they're acting that way where they can't see maybe further than what's right in front of them?
Absolutely. 1,000% imposter syndrome. I probably talk to 1 or 2 people a week that are dealing with imposter syndrome. And it's running rampant. It's its own epidemic in its own right, I believe, in today's culture. And I formerly dealt with that, right? And I heard a quote one time that said that someone is making 10 times the impact as you, the influence as you, the income as you, because they aren't smart enough to doubt themselves. And so what I did is I just de-smarted everything, right? And I just got unsmart. I unlearned some things, I had to rewire some things. And that's when I think my life really changed. That's when life opened up for me, when I just saw things as an opportunity. And I always ask myself and I ask my audiences, I ask them, how would you live if you knew how much time you had left? If you knew you only had 31 Christmases left or 25 Thanksgivings left, you probably would live a little bit differently, right? And so I try to put numbers and logic and metrics to things because we know not the day nor the hour. And so, one thing my brother told me one time, he said that, you don't pass away, you don't leave this earth the last time you take a breath, but rather the last time someone says your name, right? And so I'm all about creating impact and lasting influence, things that will outlive us, right? And that was a movie, I can't remember the name of it. I don't know if it was 300 or something, but it was a little boy and he was talking to the warrior Achilles, and Achilles was going off to war, and the little boy was asking him, he says, aren't you scared? Like, they're so much bigger than you and they're faster and they're stronger. He says, aren't you afraid? And Achilles looked at him and said, that's why no one will remember your name, right? Because you didn't take risks. You didn't go after what you wanted. And I sit here as a 7th generation entrepreneur because my grandfather took a risk a long time ago. And so I want to be the one that continues that and and be someone hopefully my descendants will talk about in future years as someone that took risk. And so say all that to say, I want people to live without limitations because the best ideas, as we know, are in the graveyard. And I want people to bring those out and to live with just a vigor and a sense of empowerment that is just unlike anything. So that's what lights me up, and that's what I love to do and help people see.
Wow.
Yeah. That movie was Troy, and I remember
Troy,
because
thank you.
that line shifted a lot in my life. I was in college and hearing him say that, that's why if you're afraid, that's why no one will remember your name. I remember that was a huge shift in my
Thank
life.
you. Appreciate that, Troy.
To hear you say grandfather, a seventh generation entrepreneur, you just don't hear that from too many African Americans our age. I mean, I feel like we're still a couple of generations from that because that shift is changing. And, I know that you speak to a broad audience, not just to African American audiences. But let me just kind of tie in there with that and say, coming from where you're coming from, the experiences you've seen, how you've grown up, now you're in a space where you're crossing over and you're speaking in, mixed audiences and even taking it back to that color outside the lines. It reminds me of Matthew 18, where Jesus talks about seeing the kingdom of heaven like a child. And even for, myself being a Black man, stepping into and having been on stages and spoken to crowds where there's only one or two Black people in the crowd and really leaning into God. And it's like, what do I have to bring them? How does that affect? Because I know there are people who are listening and thinking, how do I get to that space? Or, who can see me? Or how can I break through that glass ceiling?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll answer from two different ways. And so I'm from Mississippi. We're number one in everything bad, right? So, but I'm a proud Mississippian. I wouldn't have it any other way because of the values that I grew up with. The one thing I would say, I'll answer from an African American perspective and also from a more general perspective. Growing up, I knew I was Black, but I didn't feel Black, if that makes sense, right? There are some spaces we enter in, we feel Black. There's some restaurants, some bars, some places, some conferences where you just kind of feel the Blackness on you, like, yeah, you know what I mean? You love who you are, you're proud of who you are, you wouldn't change anything about it, but you feel it, right? Before you've had a chance to even open your mouth or express yourself, you feel like you're being judged or being prejudiced against, right? And so it's just not a good feeling, no matter how proud you are of your heritage and your culture. Everybody wants to be accepted and given a fair shot to show who they are. So that's not a confidence thing. That's not a pride thing. That's just human nature, right? In my opinion. And so growing up, my dad, he actually he was obviously a hardworking guy, but with him being his own business owner and seeing all my uncles and even my grandfather, I personally never saw my dad bow his head to anybody, if that makes sense. He was respectful, but I never saw my dad kind of like, cower to anybody, if that makes sense, right? I never saw that,
Wow.
right? My dad had me writing checks when I was 5 years old, right? Back when that was a thing, and so when we got to, and this was when checks were a thing, right? Before Apple Pay and everything, Zales kind of stuff. Now, when I got to multi-age and we're writing checks in second and third grade, I'm the first one done with my work and I'm in recess, right? Because my dad taught me when I was 5. And that was a performance enhancing, I guess, opportunity or, because it's all about exposure. And a lot of people in our community are not exposed, right? It's not a lack of capacity. It's all about exposure. Malcolm Gladwell, he did a study, right, where they talks about when they measure African-American kids as juxtaposed against white kids. And when they come in, they're the same. But over time, you start to see a gap form, but it's because it's the summertime that creates that separation, the experiences, the resources they have, the people they're around, the conversations they hear. And so in
Wow.
the summertime, I was with my dad for 18 years, right? Watching him do business deals and build houses. And so that's all I ever saw, right? And so I understand that that is very much a privileged upbringing. And I'm cognizant of that. And that's why I try my best to give back and empower as much as I can. The second part of it is, God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called, right? And
Yeah.
so you see behind me, before I ever picked up a microphone, I read all these books behind me. Like I read all, you know what I mean? And
Love
so
it.
I spent time preparing. I prepared harder than anybody that I'm aware of, right? Before I ever stepped on stage. Understands human psychology, social psychology, the heart, the mind, emotions, attention spans, body language, lighting, feng shui, like you name it. Like I went very, very deep into my craft. And so that way, when I walk into a room now, I can say to myself, I'm qualified, I care, and I'm prepared. If I can answer those 3 questions, I don't care who's in the audience. And I've spoken to CEOs, I've spoken in front of Nick Saban, the University of Alabama, right?
Yeah.
And I bowed my head to no one because I never saw my dad do it.
Wow.
So you said qualified, prepared, and what was the other one? And you care. Qualified, prepared, and care. I love it.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Wow, what a powerful story, and how amazing to have had that guidance growing up, how to be an entrepreneur, how to break past challenges and barriers and obstacles, and how to like really just go and stand out and just shine. And like you said, being prepared is such a huge part of that. It's like we can't just expect us people to bring us up on stage, right? It's like we got to have something to offer, have that value and shine in that way. So with that being said, how do you give back when you're on stage in terms of like what you have to offer, and what kinds of guidance do you give to people who are watching you?
All the 4 A's of what I call personal leadership, and there's a bonus one I'll add to it at the end. But
Mm.
I'll wrap it all together. I call it the 5 abilities, right? The 5 abilities, and I'm a big Jim Rohn fan. I think
Oh, I love
Jim
him.
is one of the best to ever touch the microphone, and I listen to him
Yeah.
before every speech. And so, a ritual, ice cold shower, listen to Jim Rohn, and say a prayer and go deliver. Right? It's the same routine every.
Awesome.
He really kind of gets me in the zone, and he had a speech that he talked about the 5 abilities, and they were obviously a little different than ones I came up with. But some of the abilities I share are first availability, showing up for yourself and showing up for other people. The second being adaptability. The only constant is change. Right? Everything's changing day to day now. Right? Everything is changing. Right? The third thing is accessibility, which is different from availability in that you can be available and not accessible. Right?
Mm.
If you are in an office all day, right, you could be available physically, but if your door is closed all the time, or if you're not creating an environment where you welcome people, right, into your space, into your ecosystem, into who you are, right, and not being inviting, you can be available and inaccessible at the same time. And the last one is accountability, right? You have to be accountable to yourself above all before I think you'll be accountable to anybody else. And that comes from your personal standards and your personal kind of code of conduct, and not what's on a paper in front of you, but how your work transcends. It talks about in Colossians 3:23, right? Do your work unto the Lord and not unto men. Right. So your
Mm.
personal standards must exceed what's in front of you. And the fifth ability is vulnerability. I think vulnerability is an absolute superpower. Being able to share, to express that, hey, I made a mistake. I didn't do the right thing. I fell short here, because no one is perfect. Nothing is perfect. And I think that is what humanizes us. Right. And so I don't get on stage trying to appear perfect or some paragon of perfection or some oracle of opportunity. I come in saying that, hey, I've fallen short and I've laid down, but I didn't stay there. And that's what it is all about. If everything is perfect in your life and your story is just sheer, right? Essentially, it's flatline and it's a dead story, right? Best stories have the ebbs and flows like an EKG, right? And so you take people on a journey, right? And you have to understand the collective consciousness of what is going on just in the world now and what people are experiencing. And you have to be able to speak to that authentically and wrap a story in that, and also give them actionable takeaways. There's so much content out online now. Everybody's doing this, everybody's that. And what I do has the lowest barrier to entry, because
Mm.
it's a First Amendment right. But for people that can actually get in to inspire hope and inspire change, that's where the separation happens, I believe. Right. And so everyone has the opportunity to talk, but to be able to present, to be able to inspire, I think is a different skill set. And that's what we try to get across when we are on stage.
Out of all the opportunities you've had, all the stages you've been on, the companies you've consulted, the places you've spoken, which one was the most wow? You said you stood in front of a 6-year-old kid who said, "This is why I color outside the lines." What was that moment where you were like, "Thank God I was called to do this"?
I would say it was my first one. It was October 16, 2016. My mom booked it for me. It was my first
Oh,
ever.
wow.
Yeah, my mom
Nice.
booked it for me. Yeah, it was, and I go back and watch the video, man, and it's humbling, man, just to watch that.
Watching
Gosh,
yourself
man.
speak is not just humbling, it's embarrassing, it's humiliating.
Yeah.
Even funnier. So in that audience, the audience was comprised of my mom and my dad, my third grade English teacher, two teenagers, and a toddler. My first audience,
That's
right?
awesome.
And I had this paper, I had like really, really big font, and I was trying to make sure I wasn't reading from it. And I was trying to look, I mean, it was horrible. And my mom recorded it, and I was
Oh.
glad she recorded it. But the problem was there was a huge purse in front of her with a big like handle on it.
Uh-huh.
And she recorded it through the handle, and you can see the handle.
The whole time?
Framed in the purse.
Oh my god. Like the St. Louis Arches, like, I'm
It was
censored,
her
like,
frame. It was a frame, right?
oh my gosh. I mean, she had headroom composition. I mean,
Oh,
it
man,
was
that's
tight,
hilarious.
but, you know, I think that one was most special because I just recently dropped my book, and my mom got me in the local newspaper in
Aw.
Coffeyville, Mississippi. Population, probably a few hundred, maybe, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so I told her I wanted to speak, and she went out and got that for me, right? She went out
Oh.
and got me my first gig, and that was a rep. That was rep number 1, and I
Mhm.
always say that if you can present in front of people that know you, that love you and care about you, and kids, the toughest audiences. Those are the
Wow.
toughest ones.
Yeah.
It's toughest ones, right? Because
Yeah.
the people you care about, that you love, that love you, you wanna obviously make them proud, but there's a little
Yeah.
bit of inherent pressure, right? Because 'Cause they're seeing you in a
Yeah.
different light in some ways, and
Mhm.
then children, I mean, oh my god, like, the
Yeah.
innocence of children
Yeah.
will humble you, you know what I mean? One minute you're great and they're locked in, the next minute doing cartwheels, and they're
Right.
on top, and like, why are you on top of the podium? Like,
Yeah.
right?
I keep their attention.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, so I've learned that helped me learn the different presenting styles among different audiences, right? And
Mm.
so I tend to more on the side of working with the collegiate age and corporate side, but I would not be who I am and where I am if I had not started out working with children when I first started. I encourage anybody, you wanna be a pro, work with kids.
That's amazing. That's
You
great
know, I
advice.
felt that when you said going back and watching your old self. I literally have sitting right here on my desk.
CD?
This is from 2014.
Is that a DV what do you call it? I don't even know what they're called anymore.
Babe,
DV
remember on
a
Monday when I
DVD?
asked you if you had a CD? I don't even have anything to play this in. And she's like,
Right.
"Yeah, I think downstairs in the closet in a box, you'll find
Wow.
in a plug-in CD player," which she did have because I don't know why I just felt like the spirit was telling me to watch. And this is one of the first from 2014 that I threw in, and
Oh
watching it
my
was like I couldn't even sit still. So when you said that, watching your old self, but it really
oh my
inspired
god.
me because I saw a different level of purity back then, and like just I was too dumb to know what I didn't know, and I was just going for
Mm,
it. And from there, my wife will tell you, I've been like on a writer's kick. I've been up every night till 3 a.m. just writing. And
yeah,
so
yep, yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yep, yeah,
I
absolutely.
feel
Writing is great.
yeah, I feel the same too whenever I'm feeling unsure about my direction and where I'm going, I like to look back at those first videos, those first, courses I did or first podcasts I ever did. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so cringeworthy. But I also think back, I got a lot of feedback back then of like, wow, you inspired me and this and that. And so when I look back and I think I could inspire people even at coming like that, right? Even like at
Mhm.
this new, raw, like undeveloped self. Imagine what I could do from here on out, you know? And so I like to look at that as a reminder, even as cringeworthy as it is, but to remember that we got to start somewhere. And, for those watching who are like afraid to step out, it's like you got to let yourself suck, right? You got to let yourself
Mhm,
just do it because even in that place, you're going to change some lives. You're going to inspire people, even just your first step out. And
Mhm.
when you do that, you just keep building from there and growing. So I
Oh,
really love
absolutely.
that. Mhm.
Absolutely,
you know,
absolutely,
Philippians 1
absolutely.
6 says, "He who began a good work in you will
Working you
complete
is
it,
hate it.
not today,
Mhm.
not tomorrow, but like
Alright.
in the end." And
And
so, even Melissa, you said you have to let yourself suck. It's not even letting yourself suck, it's you're showing up at your best. And like what Will
Mhm.
said, you're prepared. And, if you show up prepared at that time, just because you grow doesn't mean you didn't suck. It just means that God is continuing to do the
Mhm.
good work in you. So, yeah, to that person sitting back and looking at someone like a Will and thinking, like, man, I would love to be that someday. You know what? Be it today. Start now.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
good way to
absolutely.
look at it.
Absolutely, man. The progression, that was one of my favorite quotes. It's kinda cheesy, but they said that the only place where you can start at the top is when you're digging a hole, right? And
That's
I
good.
love that so much because it makes a lot of sense, right? And I think,
Yeah.
we hold ourselves to a higher standard than other people do, right? We have to
Yeah,
be
yeah.
kinda honest with that, and
Mhm.
I respect that, I think, the Bible talks about being content, but it doesn't talk about being complacent, right? And I think there's a stark contrast between the two. So I think looking back, is healthy because sometimes it's hardest to watch the film on ourselves. That's one of
Yeah,
the hardest things to do, right? It's because we're
yeah.
our own biggest critics. So that is funny. The CD, the DVD, the Blu-ray, that is hilarious. Like wow.
Blu-ray, that's what's
It's not a
cool.
Blu-ray. Yeah, this is before Blu-ray.
Funny thing is, I actually have like it's a relic that I have sitting over here literally for decoration. It's a DVD and VCR combination I got from my parents' house. That's for decoration, right? So if I can ship it to you,
Yeah, next time we need one, we'll keep that in
Yeah.
mind, right?
Got you. I got you. Shipping will probably be $78 minimum.
That's good.
That thing's heavy. That thing's bulky as
I
heck.
know, right? To ship it would cost more than what it's worth.
Oh, absolutely. No question
Oh.
about it.
Let me pivot for a second. Well, we talked about your book, we talked about you
Mm-hmm.
speaking, but you also do consultant work. What will a company get from you, an organization, and what size organization if you were to come in and consult with them?
Yeah, absolutely. So it looks a few different ways. There'll be some times where I'm on campus and I may work with a small group of their athletes or their staff, right, on personal development, body language, communication codes. There's a thing called the 5 communication codes that we talk about, everything from how you celebrate people to how you critique them, to how you collaborate with them, all these different pieces. And the way I kind of frame it is, we heard the praise sandwich, right? The good, the bad, and the good again. I kind of reframe that to being more in line with kind of at the top, you may have, say, a critic, right? At the top layer. The bottom layer, you may have a cheerleader. Both can be bad if overindulged. Because someone who critiques you too much, it's not healthy. Someone who praises you too much and does not see you for yourself and is able to give you correction, right? Or give you empowerment or constructive criticism. I personally don't think that's healthy either. And so between a critic and a cheerleader in the middle, you have a coach, right? And that's where I like to come in terms of, how we're developing our people. Are you listening to respond when someone speaks up, right? Because as we know that, if you're a leader or someone that has influence and you don't listen to your people, pretty soon you'll be surrounded by people that have nothing to say. And you'll be wondering why you're getting blindsided, why you didn't know about this, and why is this coming down the pike and no one told you, right? Because you haven't
Yeah.
created that trust and that psychological safety. And one kind of analogy I use, worked in football for a long period of time. And what we did is when we would fly teams out, we got 125 football players. Well, we couldn't put the offensive lineman and defensive lineman in the same part of the plane or the plane would crash, right? We had to balance it, right? So the analogy is getting the right people and getting them in the right seats, right? You know what I mean? It's kind of an ode to the energy bus that John Gordon wrote. And so a lot of it speaks to that end because a lot of it is just being able to step back and take a 30,000-foot view, right? Because I believe everyone has a good bone in their body. And I think and I pray that most people are doing the best they can with the information they have at that point in time, right? And so this grace, I think, is very important. But beyond that, what things can we implement, right? Because people love a good survey, but most surveys say that surveys are not honest, right? So, you know what I mean? There's a statistic for every statistic about every statistic, right?
Yeah. Statistics say that 75% of statistics are made up.
Right. There's some stat on top of what you said that says something about that stat is not accurate either.
Right.
Right. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so, yeah. And so and I think I always tell people that we're so connected, we become disconnected. And in some ways it's good because this allows us to conduct this podcast on this platform being in all different parts of the country. The other side of it is, we have Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and we got Teams, and we got Zoom, and we got Gmail and Outlook, and we're so connected, we can be very disconnected, right? And I always try to tell people that we have to use things like emails for confirmation and not for conversation. A comment, or a share, it'll never replace a kind word, a hug, or a smile, right? And Truett Cathy, founder of Chick-fil-A, he always said that, how do you know if someone needs encouragement? The answer is if they are breathing, right? So I think for me, it's all about going back to the basics. And that's why the premise of what I do outside of, Color Outside the Lines, one of the premises is the shortest distance between two people is connection. And how do we create that connection? Because once you understand someone, once you understand maybe what battle they're fighting, because everyone's dealing with something we know nothing about, once you can crack open that door that gives grace, that gives connection, right? That creates an environment of trust and psychological safety. And I'd be hard pressed to not see relationships and organizations improve when that kind of culture is present and thriving.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. And one of the things that you brought up was body language. I love body language. It's like one of my favorite things, and like my background in psychology. And I just find it so fascinating because it's such a huge aspect of our communication, right? So what do you guide people with in body language? I know you probably do a whole program, but maybe just like a couple of things, an overview you can share why it's important to understand body language.
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest thing is not to create barriers between yourself and the person you're talking to, right? And the barriers that we create are typically the barriers with our arms, right? In our hands, whether it's arms folded or whether we are doing kind of we call the fig leaf, the right over left, left over right, kind of like a groomsman in a wedding.
Yeah.
These things, everything's contextual, right? Body language is very much contextual, right? Everything from hands in the pockets to arms to arms folded to hands behind your back to hands on your hips. Like all these things can be very contextual. And so in professional conversations, I like to coach people to one, make sure that your feet and your toes are squared up to the person you're talking to. You don't want to be looking over people's shoulder. You don't want to look disengaged because you're kind of halfway open here and you're kind of talking here, right? You want to
Yeah.
square up to that person, give them your full attention. And the other thing is always show the hands because the hands and palms always show openness, honesty, trust, surrender, and communication. And so what I do that is, I don't see many people do this. I actually use a finger clicker. So my clicker
Mm.
goes on my finger, wraps around it, and I don't
Okay.
actually hold it. And so that way I have full range of my hands at all times, right? And so,
Nice.
because I've been known to, I don't use handheld mics, I only use lapel mics, but
Mhm.
I use my hands a lot and I put that clicker down. I've lost it before, right? It just always, I've
Right.
lost it. And so I'm
Where'd it
like,
go?
okay, I'm done
Yeah.
with that, right? But also the other, this is a little bit of an extreme example, but when your hand is closed, it creates a fist, right? It's
Mhm.
just, it unintentionally, it's just unintended consequence. And so
Yeah.
by having something that wraps around my finger, I'm able to have free reign of my hands at all times to create that sense of trust, that sense of openness. And so those are some of the basic things that we kind of go over. As you know, body language can go for 3 or 4 hours, right? But those are some things I like to kind of share because the most usual suspects are the hands and the arms in weird places. Those are the usual suspects. And
Mm.
once we kind of eradicate those or begin to be more conscious of those things, that's when you see things open up. And I'll actually do exercises where I'll let them just kind of go free reign of how they would normally communicate. And of course, you
Mhm.
see everything. Like you see from you the Macarena, you see all kind of stuff going on, right?
Right.
Then I give them another prompt, and before I give them that second prompt, I'll say, "Now try this. Try opening yourself up." Right? Try opening your palms up. Try unfolding your arms. Try taking your hands out of your pockets completely, or at least hanging your thumb or hanging your fingers, but not hiding your entire hand. Try
Mm.
getting your hands off your hips, right? So you don't look like defiant, so to
Yeah.
speak, right? And you see the conversations become instantly more fruitful because
Nice.
people are comfortable and they're more receptive and they're more open to sharing. Those are the pieces. And in line with that, as I said before, teaching people to listen and not listen to respond. And so I think all those things wrap together into an effective communication cycle. And like you said, depending on who you ask, we just talked about statistics and the validity of them or lack thereof. I've
Mm.
seen everything from 50% to 75% in terms of body language, how important it is, or
Yeah.
how prominent it is. I've never seen anything less than 50%. So we'll start there.
Yeah, it's said to be more than verbal communication.
Oh, no
Yeah,
question.
and
No
it is
question.
like so subconscious too what we do. So having that conscious training of what you do to teach us to undo those old programs or to just be more aware of how we're communicating non-verbally, it really, like you said, it helps people be receptive of you. And I think that's
Hmm.
why it's so important is that it helps that people to drop their walls with you. And then when you have that wall drop, you can communicate, right? You can receive each other. I love that.
Yeah, one thing I left out, even that is smiling. Smiling increases
Yes.
your face value, right? I always
Yes.
like to say that, right? So,
So
yeah,
true.
absolutely important. Thank you for
Mm,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Love that.
Will, we appreciate your time. Let me get you out of here with these two questions. Number one, who should be reaching out to you? Who's your target audience, your ideal person? Who's sitting out there, maybe an entrepreneur or a business owner, athlete, coach? Who should be reaching out? And then number two, where do they find you? And I know you have the social media. In fact, I sent my wife 2 days ago one of your clips from Instagram talking about seasons. And I listened to it about 12 times just to make sure that
Oh man.
I had to send it to her. But how do
That's so
people find
good.
you? Instagram, YouTube, Facebook? Where you at?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If you want to reach me first and foremost, what I love about entrepreneurship is you get to choose who you work with, right?
Mm,
I worked in the corporate world for about 12 years, right? And so I wouldn't be who I am or where I am without those connections, relationships, and trainings. But there were some times where I get the Sunday scaries because I couldn't choose who I got to work with, right? So the
mm,
beautiful thing about what I do now, I get to choose who I work with. And, I try to position myself to be able to say no, right? I
Mhm.
think is a superpower because if you are not positioned to say no, then everything becomes arbitrary and you'll just take whatever's given to you. You'll allow yourself to be, treated in any kind of way, whether it be financially or how communication wise. And so for me, the people that should be reaching out to me, or I hope we want to reach out, are people that are just good people that understand that find value, hopefully, in what I talk about and in my messaging. I will say that, I come in to be the best, right? So people that are good people and they're easy to work with, right? And so anybody wants to connect, you can reach me at willbaggett.com. That's 2 G's and 2 T's. Also on Instagram at One Bag Talk.
Well, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing out in the world and just being an inspiration and sharing your knowledge, your expertise, and your wisdom and your experience, even your stories to help other people have that same inspiration and also your faith too, which I think that's so important. And that's one of the reasons why we want this podcast is to inspire other Christians to grow the kingdom, to be an example of Christ, even if you're not specifically having a Christian business, but you showing up as a Christian in the best way you can makes a huge world of difference. So thank you for being an example of that. We loved having you on the show.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you all so much.